and we would also say that that was not ideal. So we can call a spade a spade. We can take the same measurement, which I was saying, which is not necessarily presentism, but when is a girl, what can we say about, in terms of science, about when someone is physically and mentally ready?
If you now consider this, what does the Quran actually give a guidance to?
Very nice to meet you.
You too. What does the Quran give, what kind of guidelines in terms of marriage? It doesn't...
No, I heard what you said.
No, it doesn't give you an age.
Right.
Yeah? So it tells you when they have reached the age of rushd, age of intellectual maturity.
Which is fine, right? No one's going to really argue
So we
about
can't
that.
just focus on an isolated example of the Prophet's marriage, which he did not say this is imposed, to be imposed on every individual Muslims.
I
He didn't say that.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So I think we both understand, and we have the similar kind of understanding on this issue.
Yeah, the question is, you brought up a few things about what, people are making some bad arguments about this. Using the word pedophilia, I don't think really helps elaborate the discussion. The main question is do we want to be marrying and having sex with girls of a certain age? Yeah? Is it reasonable to think that 9
See, we are now again trying
might be
to...
an age? And I will concede that in whatever traditions you want, Christian traditions, English royalty, whatever, this stuff has gone on all over the place. But as I said before, we've hopefully learned something about it. We don't know everything about it, but what present day knowledge now says, this doesn't seem to be a very good idea. We shouldn't marry girls that are 9.
We should know that in Islam considers the principle of harm. If there's going to be any harm involved, that age, even though when they've just reached the age of maturity, then in terms of the puberty, this is not a good enough age to get married because there's any amount of harm involved. So Islam has quite clear principle in terms of what you can or you cannot do.
So was she old enough?
No, I'm saying if there's going to be harm done, then that is not the age. At a point where there will be no harm done, she's intellectually mature, physically mature, and then no harm involved, this is the time when you can say, yes, this is the guideline that gives you allowance for that.
Right. Let me say this. This is a fairly soft assumption and see what you say to this. I would say that it seems to me to be fairly unlikely that a girl of 9 would be physically or mentally ready to get married.
Depending on the social historical context.
Yeah, there can always be exceptions, but...
No, not exceptions. Not exceptions.
I would say that
as we were discussing
unlikely.
earlier,
Would you agree
as we
or
were
disagree
discussing
with
earlier,
that?
I would disagree with you on this reason, that historically speaking, young girls who become women at the age of onset of puberty, they were also mature enough. So I give you example of the Indian tradition where a boy of 8-year-old is intellectually mature and can, when he reaches age of puberty, he can be physically mature and he can actually produce children. So if you look at this now, are you going to say now, okay, now he has to wait until he becomes 20? I'm saying no. The age is not what determines when you get married. This is an artificial boundary that we put up for a reason. Okay, so Islam is quite flexible, where it hasn't set an age, but it gives you minimum conditions, if you want to call that, minimum standards or conditions where this has to be at least attained before someone gets married.
Let's grant that the Quran gave sufficient guidance in this area. The question I was saying was that Muhammad married a woman that was 9. And I would say, without knowing any, clearly I wasn't there, don't know the woman, but if you put the basic facts out there, are 9-year-olds ready for marriage? I would say I don't think I've ever seen a 9-year-old that would be ready for marriage. It seems incredibly unlikely to me. What would you say to that?
Sure. Have you seen in England where 8-year-old girls or women have become pregnant and then given birth when they were 9? This has happened in this country.
I'm sure
UK.
that's happened, yeah.
Yeah. So were they ready biologically?
Biologically, yes.
Yes. So you may question whether they're intellectually ready or not.
Biologically ready in terms of able.
Yeah.
As I said, as I said before, that science says that just because a woman has reached puberty and is able, doesn't mean her body is necessarily ready for
That's
it.
what I'm saying.
Might do a bit of sex, might do a bit of harm.
That's what I'm saying. If there's any
amount
amount of harm involved, then obviously no. So Islam, as I said again, is flexible enough to give a universal guideline where You can apply this guideline anywhere in the world. You don't have to have some kind of bone density to find out your age and saying, I was discussing with a very intelligent young woman earlier, some time ago, saying you have to know your age, you have to be absolutely 18 and you can determine my bone age. You don't need to. And people in Africa or
no disagreement there. There's a question of, it's a continuum, some are ready at earlier ages than others.
Yes.
We know
so
that.
it can be different to different people or different
culture.
culture.
Towards the edge, like 9 years old, I don't believe she was ready.
No, you may believe...
I'll say that. I don't think she was ready. What would you say?
I would say, we have to take case by case. Maybe there is an example here in Britain that she was ready. You can't just take your assumption that she wasn't ready, because this is what you hope that she's not ready, because she's quite young. She's just about reached the age of biological maturity. It doesn't mean she also automatically has attained intellectual maturity.
It wouldn't be a hope on my part, by the way.
An assumption.
I would hope that she was ready, because if she wasn't, it's
an assumption. Sorry, wrong
right?
words.
If
It's an
she
assumption.
wasn't ready, it's an awful
It's an assumption.
thing. And I think that's why this subject gets the kind of
So can I ask you a question?
Does, yes.
If someone is intellectually mature and biologically mature at the age of 10, what do you consider?
I mean, if that was the case, the age doesn't matter. My contention is, I don't think that's likely at all.
You think it's not likely?
I
What's
think
not
it's
likely?
incredibly unlikely.
What's not likely? Which one?
For
Biology
someone to reach
or intellectual maturity?
Intellectual maturity.
Right.
I don't think your brain's even done growing by that age.
Okay. At what age do we become intellectually mature?
I think for men it's later, and for girls it's earlier. So I think for men, I would say it's over 20 in terms of the development of your brain.
So according to you, your understanding, a 19-year-old shouldn't get married because they're not intellectually mature.
That's not what I said. I said
If you haven't,
generally,
remember,
right?
generally, those people who are not intellectually mature, they shouldn't get married. That's what we were discussing.
If you wanted my opinion, I would say, it's probably better to get married a little later in your 20s for lots of other different reasons. You develop kind of, what you want out of life and what kind of person. There's lots of different reasons why you might not know enough when you're 18 to make a choice that's going to last, 40 or 50 years.
What determines intellectual maturity?
That's a good question.
Because we have very, very smart 11-year-old studying in Oxford and Cambridge.
Right.
We're talking about university, right? Colleges in Oxford. So this is degree level.
Right.
Very smart. Are they intellectually mature or immature?
In terms of academics, they seem to be quite mature.
Not just academia, intellectual maturity.
Well, I mean, that maturity comes with, like I said, the further development of your brain and development of your emotional...
This young man, at the age of 11, they're going to Oxford and Cambridge.
Right.
Are you suggesting they're not intellectually mature? What's missing in their maturity?
There's probably quite a bit of social development that's missing.
Like?
Social development.
Like what? What are they missing in terms of social interaction? Are you saying they're unable to understand how to interact with society?
I mean, your experience... this is what I said.
No, I'm giving you examples to understand how do one become intellectually mature, what governs that process of maturation, and what are the factors of intellectual maturity. How do we measure it?
I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to try. But as I said, obviously, as you develop, you learn more. Your brain develops, you learn more,
but
you develop emotionally. Lots of...
I agree, as you grow on. But these individual young persons, at the age of 11, for example, they're able to understand, comprehend much better than we can, for example, as general people. So if we are consider ourselves as intellectually mature individuals, looking at their brain capacity or capability, they're far can outsmart us in terms of maturity through in intellect.
In terms of ability, not necessarily maturity.
So again, what is maturity determined by? You're saying it's determined by experience.
Clearly, maturity doesn't stop at 18, does it?
No.
I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I'm sure you felt over a 10-year period, you're quite, maybe not a different person.
Enough? Are they intellectually mature enough?
I think that's a better word, mature enough. We've determined that when you're 18, it seems that you're mature enough.
It's an arbitrary age from nowhere.
It is. But, a lot of people would discourage getting married there for the reasons that I said. You're better off waiting and not rushing.
Where did this age come from?
Sorry?
Decided by what?
Well, I mean, obviously there are physical factors that show you to have matured into an adult.
Someone who is
Obviously-
17 and a half and someone who's 18.
Yeah.
Do you consider that their intellectual maturity is a huge difference or a slight difference?
Probably a slight difference.
Slight difference. So a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old, you really consider that their maturity intellectually, there's a difference?
It could be quite a bit. That depends upon the person.
Like what? Like what?
Huh?
Like what? A 17 and a 19-year-old.
Yeah. I mean, if I said, let's, without trying to strap ourselves down with going through a lot of psychological thing, if I said someone's acting like a baby, you would know what I'm talking about. Some people act like babies. Some people keep acting like babies.
Yeah, like many 40-year-old here acts like a baby, for example. You've
That's
seen
right.
yourself.
That's
right?
right.
It doesn't mean that they shouldn't get married.
No, it doesn't.
So we should not put, these obstacles in the forms of guidelines. We're saying this is the only.
Let me make a distinction. I'm not trying to make a distinction between 17 and 19-year-olds and what. I'm not trying to finesse this and get it down to a right age. I'm saying when you go that far down the spectrum, down to 9 years old, I think it's really unlikely that that person is physically or mentally ready. And I have to say, I don't think you could show me a case of a person, maybe you can, which I'm open to. This is why I'm kind of going here. Showing me a person that's ready for that. I would say,
What about 13? What about 14? What about 15?
It's obviously much better, isn't it?
Yeah,
13.
So you would say, look, a 15-year-old is okay because we have many girls getting married, 15 years old, having children, and their children having babies again, and then she becomes their grandmother when she's not even 30.
It's a world of difference between a 15-year-old and a 9-year-old.
Fine,
A world of
fine.
difference. We're not talking about minutiae here. We're not finessing it.
Fine. So the more developed you are, the better you are in terms of the prospects of less harm, right?
Yeah, I mean, here's what we don't want to happen, right? What you don't want to happen to a girl that gets married to her is, one, the physical harm that comes with a body that's not ready for intercourse,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
And as I've said, science has said that when a girl has reached puberty, she is not necessarily ready, and most likely not ready for intercourse. That's number one. Number two is...
You need to go on number one first. That's a bit odd from science. Because your body, the biology determines that you're actually now getting ready to conceive. That's the transformation that's happening in your body.
That's part of it. There's multivariables to everything.
No, if you think about it, this puberty is a transformation where a girl, for example, develops into a woman who can bear a child. That's the development, that's the transformation. And then to say that actually she's not ready is a contradiction in terms. Because
I don't think
this change is happening for that very reason, to conceive a child.
Yeah, I mean, we have to go into the science and say why they're saying that, right? I mean, because things don't happen all at once. I mean, generally your body changes slowly.
They are
so
saying, I know some of the reports a long time ago, the reason why, because in certain cultures and certain countries, because of malnutrition, because of poverty, these young women, would have a very bad pregnancy.
Yeah.
The child would not develop, will have development delays later on, and conditions of undue development. Is because of these nutritional deficiencies during child pregnancy. So if you can argue, if now you have a young woman in a Western country where nutrition is not a problem. In fact, getting yourself not to be fat is a problem because there's so much nutrition around. Then the argument doesn't work anymore because now biology has determined the woman, this young girl, to conceive and to have a child and go through this pregnancy. Nutrition is not a problem.
I never would have said. I mean, I totally agree with you that nutrition is a huge factor in how people develop and whether they develop even completely or not.
Benny, I think we both agree. We both agree.
But I'm going to press you a little bit, not to be a stinker, but just to press. So are you saying that good nutrition gets us for a 9-year-old to be ready?
No, I'm saying this is an argument against the medical field who says you shouldn't get married while you're just very young. The arguments were initially proposed, as far as I remember, right? I may be wrong, but if I remember correctly, it's because of this. Because they're doing epidemiological studies where different societies, different cultures throughout globally, what is the harm being done when young women conceive early and have children? And the reasons that are bringing out on those studies is because of these nutritional deficiencies during pregnancy.
That might be the case. I don't remember the study. I just remember that they said once she reached puberty, she wasn't.
Anyway, can I ask you a different question altogether?
Yeah, go on.
I mean, we agree. I mean, just to summarize then, we agree.
We agree, except
that
for the
it is not just the biology.
That's right.
And this age determines. There's a lot of complicating factors.
That's right.
And some people don't even get mature when they're even 30 years old.
That's right.
Biologically and physically. Okay. So there are lots of variables involved. We were discussing in the context of the accusations of pedophilia to our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yeah,
that's it. So this is totally unjustified, and in fact, it doesn't help bridge the gap.
Justified. That term in category, that's where I'll give you the presentism, because clearly everyone was married. Girls are quite young, so there wouldn't have been the same moral maybe awareness or anything that it might do wrong. So I don't think we can paint him with that brush. The brush we can paint him with is that if he's getting guidance from the creator of the universe and a girl of 9 is not ready, then we can paint him with that brush.
Yeah, but as I said, the Prophet ﷺ, for example, didn't like to have garlic. It doesn't mean he imposes that on every individual. The Quran clearly sets guidance for Muslim man and woman, and it may also give guidance for the Prophet also, because he also received guidance from God how to conduct. He's reprimanded for, ignoring, for example, when some blind man came and wanted attention, and he was giving attention to the allies at that time, and God reprimanded him. So he is also a recipient of guidance, but of course, when God guides him, he's the best guide. But there can be some individual personal circumstances, which doesn't mean that needs to be imposed on every believer's man or woman. That's the point I'm making.
Let me ask you something completely hypothetical. So you can see where I come from in this argument, is that the fact that Muhammad married someone at 9 puts a little bit of question to me on whether he is who he claims he is.
Why would that be a question?
Because I don't think that someone getting divine
presentism.
Direction. No, it's not presentism. It's as I said before.
I'll tell you why.
I don't think the girl was ready. No, I can't say that for an absolute certainty.
First of all,
certainly probability says
if the father of the girl consider her had to be able to get married. If the father of the girl, in fact, she was already engaged with someone else.
Yeah, that doesn't matter.
No. Just to say,
I grant that everyone at the time thought she was ready. Because that's how they did things. They married girls off young. They might have been marrying girls off that were too young to get married
but the
all
girl
the time.
Itself
it's accepted
has
as normal.
a say, an understanding in a relationship, which you somehow think, okay, the Prophet is the one who thought, and not the spouse that he's getting married to.
She may have. I mean, if I said something like this, sometimes girls get married off very young and they don't want to get married, and the fathers marry them off anyway. I wouldn't be saying anything strange, but it happens all the time.
Happens.
I'm not saying that means that's what the Prophet did. I'm just saying we can't.
But in Islam it's different.
I'm just saying, obviously, there's a certain pressure on the girls.
But in terms of the guidelines in Islam, if a woman doesn't want to get married, the father cannot force that particular woman to get married to their choice.
He shouldn't, but they could, and they often, as I said, they often
No, that's
do.
not the guidelines from Islam.
I didn't say that was the guidelines.
Yeah, so Islam gives you guidelines where the woman's choice,
because there's obviously two parts with Muhammad. Is he's not just sticking. I mean, obviously he's got a direct connection with God. I mean, he's special. He should be. I don't know. Is he perfect? Is he perfect? He should be perfect. He should be.
He's the best example.
it's the best example. So you shouldn't find something that falls way outside of line.
But I don't see why this example of him marrying someone, because your opinion is she wasn't ready. That's your opinion. That's your assumption. But if she was ready, you will say it's okay.
I think I've clarified why it's my assumption. Is I think it's highly unlikely that you could present me with a 9-year-old that's ready to get married.
I gave you example from Britain here, an 8-year-old.
No, you said someone who could conceive a child.
No, it happened. It was in the papers.
Yeah,
I used to carry that paper cutting with me just to demonstrate my point.
Right. I grant that someone could physically give birth at that age. I grant that quickly.
Sure.
There's no contention there. My question is, is her body ready for that? Is she mentally ready for that?
What if she was? Okay.
If she was, then there's no problem.
Sure. She lived.
It's not the age.
No.
If she's ready,
let's
she's
look
ready.
at something. It's important to actually get her perspective on it. What was her perspective in her marital life with the Prophet ﷺ? Because she outlived the Prophet. What was her perspective? That's important to understand. If you
seem to be positive.
Not seem to be, absolutely positive. Absolutely positive. I mean, from her, we got most of our religion, a lot of our religion and religious teaching from her. She passed on. So how is it that if she felt harmed in any way, she would have spoken about it?
Yeah, I mean, it could be, there's lots of things that
So that should decide whether she was ready or not.
There's lots of things that probably happen to your life in your life that are harmful, and you don't know the difference.
No. What I'm saying is, in terms of could be the case. No. I would not agree with this point here. If she had a relationship, if she was
something that harms you that you don't know.
If she was married and she had any issues, any problems, she wasn't ready because this young age, she would have spoken about it.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm not saying maybe. I'm saying she would definitely have spoken about it.
I grant you that.
Yeah. So that's why we have positive remarks from her testimony, from her marital life with the Prophet. That is enough and sufficient for us to take and say the relationship that he has, whether she was ready or not. I mean, I don't have to go any beyond this at all. I was going to summarize it, but we keep on bringing back on this issue. In terms of the question that I was going to ask you, a lot of these issues revolve around our concept of God. What's your concept of God?
I don't really have one.
So do you have some kind of opinion about this reality and whether it was always there, what came about, and where it come about, where you come from, where you're going?
Obviously, I have opinions that are based on science, and that's about it. Obviously, I can imagine what could have been, how things might come up with.
So we are constantly learning from
alternative hypotheses, but obviously, I couldn't say anything for certain.
So, from what you understand, how's our universe always been from scientific understanding of the different models they present?
Well, science can discuss the universe back to shortly after the Big Bang, and that's as far as it can say anything about it.
So it's actually a finite universe, in that sense.
Scientists don't say whether it's finite or whether it's infinite. There's models that do both. No one knows which is the right model. It could be that the Big Bang is the beginning of everything that exists. It could be that the Big Bang is part of a greater continuum where these events happen quite a lot. I don't find anything logically or wrong with that, or I don't see how you could imagine that's not the case, but we don't know.
So, in terms of these two, opposing understanding of our universe, the different models, how do you think the role of our creation or our existence in relation to this universe? Are we a product of our universe ourselves, or are we actually a creation of a creator who created this universe? How does that sound to you? Does the science that you're familiar with, does it tell you that yes, it's possible that we can come from a product of chance or unconscious existence?
So clearly science tells us that we came out of the product as a product of the universe. So you could call it random, you could say it's not purpose. I don't think it really matters. You know, the universe has evolved in a certain way, and we are a part of that process, and that's how we came about.
Is the universe
Now that
conscious?
being said, I don't think that requires you to be an atheist or anything, or not have a God belief. You know, I don't see anything wrong with having a creator that created this process. I see nothing wrong with it.
What's your view? Is a creator involved or no creator?
I don't know.
So you're agnostic in either of the positions?
Yeah, so my position as far as religion would be that I do believe religions themselves to be man-made, mostly, if not entirely. That doesn't stop one from believing that there might be a creator, that he might be personal, that he might instill us with some morals or guide us morally. There's nothing that stops you from proposing any of those things.
If you have an option of there might be a creator, then it's also possible from that option that the creator, as you said, may have guided people. If taking that possibility to its logical conclusion. If you have a position where there is no creator, then this has one conclusion to follow from it. If you have a possibility of another option where there is a creator and this creator this creator created this universe, then it's logical to explore that this creator may have given reasons why he's created, may have shown guidance of how to live our life, may have given purpose of our life and how to follow this purpose. That means then religion entirely cannot be said, from your position, is entirely man-made. As you said, you don't say entirely man-made, but maybe some of them, maybe most of them.
Well, let's put it this way.
Not all of them.
I don't claim to be talking to God or have had any revelations or anything like this. Yet, you know, from a purely secular means, you could come up with some of the same types of moralities. And in fact, people have. You know, there's been plenty of secular philosophy done on morality done over the last couple of thousand years. It's not strange at all. So
morality can be, something that has been accepted in a particular society, and it can change because morality is based on the social conditioning of the people. Today, you might consider yourself human sacrifice is unacceptable, but at one point, the same humans considered it to be a praiseworthy action. The Aztecs did it. It was praiseworthy. It's a noble act to actually sacrifice your own life for the rain to happen by this God who will be pleased with your own sacrifice.
That's right.
Yeah. So in this kind of understanding, the morality can be subjective, and which it is, and can be relative to particular social historical context.
Yeah, I want to clarify. I mean, morality is based on learning. I mean, part of it is a certain learning of how societies work. You know, clearly there was a lot more killing that went on in the streets in the earlier days than there is now. Why is that? Well, I don't think it's because of divine revelation. I think it's a matter of people saying, this killing is really killing me. So how can we stop this? How can we have a better? So we can all envision. I don't think one needs to be religious to envision like a utopia. What's the best kind of society we want to live in? And I think those kind of things are. There's some things that are subjective, and there's a lot more that's common. Not killing each other, not stealing from each other, respecting each other. These are things we can kind of agree on these because it makes our life more pleasant.
But this is how we are trying to accept some of these moral values. It wasn't always the case.
That's right.
Yeah, it was. So we, as you say, in your process of
it's a bit of awareness of recognizing that these principles are there. And if you would just espouse a few of them, you could make a better society. So people hadn't done it yet.
Yeah. So in Islam, the principles are such that Allah, the Creator, tells us He has created us and instilled within us the true sense of values, understanding the good and the bad. He's shown us the both ways, the good way and the bad way. Successful is the one who purifies it, makes it better, and the loser is the one who actually goes against it and takes the wrong path. So if you look at it now, this is our makeup. the human makeup, that we have this understanding of what is good or bad, and God sends prophets and messengers to remind us and give us this guidance to follow strictly this guidance, this value system, where you can live in a society harmoniously in a way that you prosper and you flourish and you become a better person. You develop yourself. So that's why, as a Muslim, there's a constant struggle of a Muslim's life to make themselves better, to become a better person. Always from the beginning of their life until they die, to constantly make themselves better. We're not perfect, but we try to reach perfection, which we'll never reach, but this is the goal. And we're not requested or demanded of to be perfect, but we have to strive to make ourselves to that level of state of being where we are a better person. We're individuals who are the most noble, and so on and so forth. And that's why Prophet Muhammad, he said one of the reasons why he was raised was to perfect the nobility character. So you can see underlying this is an assumption that people actually are noble, but he's come here to perfect it, to give the perfection to this character. So the desires that we may have, which will make it impure, which will make it less than perfect, that will be cleansed, that will be shown that it's not right, and then uplifted to a point where you become a very noble person. So people have within themselves this idea of greed, this feelings of greed. But Islam says no, you need to control it. And there are lots of different mechanisms of controlling your greed and to show selflessness, selfishness, where you go and be a person of compassion, mercy and kindness and justice and generosity, where you control this feeling. And that is where what we are actually, one of the purpose of this life is to show where and how we can balance the way we are created in our weaknesses and follow the guidance that we are supposed to follow. If we did that, then awaits for us is another life of eternal joy, happiness, bliss, and what we call total bliss and enjoyment. But if you don't follow it and you totally corrupt yourself at the point where you make yourself destined by your own belief and actions to go to a place of eternal torture and misery and suffering. So we have this balance in this life where we have to work towards something that is better. So in Islam, this belief that we have is something that you will see that our heart and mind agrees to. Like this, we want to live forever. We want to be happy forever. We want to be, the best enjoyment and so on. But we can't achieve it in this life. We can achieve it in another life. We have to also control ourselves to help our ego to make it restrained so that it doesn't interfere with the goodness of other people. It doesn't harm others. It doesn't oppress others. It doesn't commit injustice. With this principle already, even as a secular individual.
I was just going to say, sometimes I wonder why there's so much fighting about religious dogma. Because I was listening to what you said and I was thinking, it's funny, there wasn't a single thing that I would have disagreed with. Similar, I would say, and you would agree, that there's plenty of discussion around similar topics in other books, philosophies, speeches, whatever, outside of Islam. The only thing I didn't agree with, obviously, was the heaven and hell part, which doesn't fit into a second.
If you consider in our particular belief system, where justice is paramount, so there are people here in this life, they live their life, their justice being violated by other individuals, and those other individuals may be like drug lords and kings and whatever. They live their life and they get away with this injustice. Get away with the injustice. And the person who has been suffering these things, they die and they don't see the justice done. Okay? Even the concept of justice demands that they don't get away, these wicked people don't get away, and the people who are injustice done towards, they're actually seeing the justice meted out to the people and for them what injustice have been done, that's been rectified. So the day of judgment, what we say, is a necessity from the demands of justice itself. We believe in it, but it can be justifiable even from the concept of justice alone.
Do you think that, I'm just going to put this out there, do you think that kind of concept of justice, is that subjective on your part or is that real?
But this is what we accept.
The desire to have someone else punished for doing you wrong.
The desire to have justice implemented is something that is ingrained within us.
Yeah.
This justice, even a 3-year-old, if you snatch something from them, a toy or something, they'll say, give it to me back, they'll start crying.
Yeah,
it's something inbuilt.
It's a human thing.
Sense, but you will say human, but we as Muslims say this is already given by God. The understanding, the notion of justice, that we appreciate and we understand what it is, so that we don't violate this justice. It's very important. We are told in the Quran, very, strictly, you have to stand forth as true witnesses, just witnesses, even if it goes against you, your own family, your kith and kin. This is how important and how paramount Islam considers the concept of justice. Even if it goes against you, doesn't matter. You have to speak and bear witness in truth. A true witness, a true justice, a just person. So the Prophet ﷺ, I'm sure it's quite well known, this statement, he said, even if Fatima, my daughter, was to steal, if she were to steal, of course she doesn't, then her hands should be chopped off, meaning no nepotism, no favoritism. Justice has to be meted out, not because someone is poor and you mete the justice out, and when someone is rich, as we see today in many cultures and many nations and many countries. If you are very powerful and if you're very rich and in a position of authority, you just get away from the hands of the law.
Let me ask you this. Do you think we could come up with a better system of justice for theft than chopping someone's hands off? Is there a better way to remedy the situation? So
personally, no.
You've stolen.
Personally,
someone else has been stolen.
I'll tell you why. Personally, Islam is a holistic system. The system that it presents, you can call it the model of crime and punishment. This is what we say, you can't find a better system than that. You can have many alternatives, and you can see and you can implement those, and you see which one. Because the principle of Islam is based on this issue, on what? Prevention is better than cure. And because of this principle, you will have certain punishments impeded out on certain crimes with an intention or motives of deterrent as well, a deterrent aspect. It tries to deter individuals to commit this action when everything is provided for. You don't need to, for example, if you are provided the means to sustain your life, to live your life and your family with nothing of reason for you to steal, why would you steal unless something wrong with you? Then you need to be educated. If you have no means to, if you have no reasons to steal, you're a rich person, why would you steal a bread? You have the money to pay for it, for example. What's wrong then if you're stealing a bread? There's something wrong. It's not your property.
Yeah,
something clearly not right. So Islam looks at all of these aspects and says, look, there has to be an education system where it imparts this knowledge and understanding from the very young age, where don't steal someone's bread when you don't have to.
This brings me to the point I was saying, is like, do you think this is the best system? And you touched on a few things is why I would, I agree with most of the stuff you said about, earlier, but this is where we're starting to diverge.
Only when you look at it holistically.
You said, would a rich person steal?
No, would a rich person steal a bread, a piece of loaf?
Well, it doesn't matter what it is.
No. Rich people steal a whole company.
How about this?
A whole half a country.
Let's forget that. Shoplifting, something petty theft.
Yeah.
Would a rich person commit petty theft?
Yeah. Why would they do that? Some people do. Yes, some people do.
All the time.
Why?
fucked up in the head. That's why.
Just to use our language,
Sorry.
Control way. Because of the cameras, people are listening. Young people may be listening. Okay. We're having a very nice discussion.
They're not well.
Okay. So the rich people are not very well. In here, something's wrong with their psyche. So Islam deals with these people as well from the very beginning.
Yeah, but
it stops people.
You said from chopping of hands. I just don't. I don't think that's a good cure for mental imbalance.
No. This is an aspect of deterrence, right? A major aspect. When you have, you have to just look into practice. When Islam was implemented properly at that time with holistic laws, how many hands were chopped off? Not even a handful. Mind my pun. Not even a handful. Why? Because it made people, developed people, it improved people's understanding, their thinking, their thought processes, their emotional upbringing, and their physical upbringing, their intellectual upbringing.
That's an interesting point you bring up.
Because that's something that
we
needs to be looked at.
We could solve this. I don't know what countries are still chopping people's hands off for theft.
No country is implementing Islam in its entirety, so we can't really give an example
It
from
would be
today.
interesting to compare, say, maybe a Western country.
But we can't.
Incidents of theft with
You can,
but
but it's not going to do proper justice. Why? Because the countries which are implementing this, punishment of chopping of the hands, are they totally holistically implementing everything else of Islam? You can't half implement Islam and expect that everything works together. That would be a major problem. But when it was implemented, that's the point we should go to. When at the time of Islamic golden age, there were a long period of golden age in the early Islamic history, how many hands have chopped off and why? What was happening within the individuals in the Muslim society where the rich weren't stealing, shoplifting, for example? What was it within them?
To be honest, to be fair, it's conjecture on what...
Not conjectural, this is something that you can study yourself.
Where can I study?
Islamic history. Islamic history, when it was implemented within, say, first, 700 years. Let's give that broad period. Why was it that this amount of punishment wasn't actually carried out to that number that we think every second person or third person they're going to get their hands chopped off? But it didn't happen.
Let's go with this. I can kind of see where you're going with this, in that if we wanted to prevent theft, if that was our goal, we would cut people's hands off. That would sorry?
If we want to stop a crime like theft happening, then we have to have laws to deal with it. Now we need to determine what crime it is. In fact, I gave an example which is not even appropriate. Why? Stealing a loaf of bread will never, in an Islamic jurisprudence, get a penalty of cutting off hands. Why? It needs to be of a certain value, not value of a loaf. It needs to be something valuable. It needs to be protected. It needs to be hidden away and secure.
All right. Yeah, we're going to a different area, which we didn't touch on before.
But that's the condition, though. That's the condition.
There are certain extreme forms of punishment for extreme crimes.
Yes. So what we're saying is...
There's still debate. How about capital punishment? How do you feel?
How many capital punishments are there in Islam? In Islamic law?
Oh, it's not. I'm just saying in general.
No, in Islamic law, how many are there?
There's tons in the States. I'm just saying...
No, in Islamic law, there are about 5 or 6 of capital punishment crimes. Only out of zillions of possible crimes.
That includes Saudi Arabia.
No, I'm not talking about any country. I'm talking about from Islamic law, which is the basis of implementing a law in any Muslim country. So whether Saudi Arabia or Pakistan or Iran or whichever country it is, doesn't matter. If you're going to implement Islamic law, the Islamic law comes from the Quran and the prophetic teaching, and the understanding and the consensus of the Prophet's companions and then the students. And then there's an analogical deduction, what we call qiyas. So you have given you 4 sources of Islamic law already. Now, what we are saying is the crime and the punishment must go hand in hand. You can't punish with a chopping of hands with stealing a loaf of bread or a lollipop. Why? It doesn't have these conditions met. The conditions are quite strict. The strict is it needs to be hidden away and secured away. That means the person who is actually stealing he is really someone not like a normal person who's trying to steal by breaking their lock or something, who has no need of lots of these things.
You didn't say that before.
I thought you knew.
When I brought up the issue of the rich person who is a bit of an idiot and goes and steals
I assumed you knew, because
I
when
thought
we were
you were saying
discussing
they
this,
should get their hands. And I was like, this is rough.
My apologies. I thought you understood.
That was my thing. Is there's a different approach to justice and mercy have to be weighed in a certain way, and it's not easy to achieve both.
Taking someone's life away for getting capital punishment is not something like a trivial matter.
No, it's not.
It's not a trivial matter. Serious. So that's why this serious matter means the crime that they've committed is serious equally. Yes. So if you look at the crimes that carries out this capital punishment, is actually something to do with this very, very grievous in the eyes of Islam. For example, highway robbery, where it's not stealing. Someone comes along in broad daylight and commits the theft and murder at the same time, where your whole life is unsecure. You cannot even live your life in public daylight where you're threatened for your security. These kind of crimes cannot be just £10 fine or 1 year imprisonment.
No,
Islam considers these are crime against society, where they need to have a very strict and harsh punishment to show to the individual that this is what will happen to you, as well as to the others who may be even thinking of doing that because of their, unwell mind. Let's put it that way, as we said. Not right.
The unwell mind is obviously all cases wouldn't be this way, but I'm talking about a bit of an impulse that you can't resist.
Some people,
cases,
for example,
the cases are what do you do with a person who can't resist their impulse?
So if you look at it now, there are a lot of people who have these impulses of raping. They want to rape. They want to rape women who are not their wife or their girlfriend. They just want to rape. Okay, this impulse they have. Maybe they're psychopaths, or maybe they're conditions from the very young age of watching, all these movies or whatever, encouraging them to go about and actually trying it out and saying, even though the person is not consenting, because rape is without consent, right? This is relationship without consent. Even though they're not consenting, they want to actually overpower this woman and to fulfill their desires. Now, how do we deal with these people? This conditioning didn't happen overnight. This is the Islamic understanding. These kind of mindset didn't happen just overnight, just like that. There may be few individuals who are actually psychopaths, where they will be trained and rehabilitated differently. They will be dealt with differently. But people at large, when you are coming up with this kind of impulses to carry out your impulse and forcibly enjoy yourself on others, these impulses, Islam considers, have been developed in a process of time, of conditioning by the society, the environment, lots of different factors. When we say environmental factors, it could be that the people they're hanging around with, bad influence. It could be they're watching the media, whether it's the internet or whether it's the TV or it's the movies in cinemas, where they're somehow seeing people are getting away with it. People are forcing each other, and it gives them this adrenaline rush. Maybe I can get away with it as well. In Islam, these kind of encouragement are prevented. We don't show open licentiousness, if I can use this word, I can't remember how it's pronounced, where, this open kind of thing about sexuality and sexual perversion or sexual immoralities, let's call it that way. There are certain sexual moral behavior and there are sexual immoral behavior. Islam doesn't even encourage this happening in society in any form, whether it's in school, college, university, workplace, whether it's the shops that you go to, the newspaper you read, the movie you see. It doesn't encourage that. So it tries to prevent this kind of thing happening and educates at the same time, so that the individual is brought up in an understanding where no, you have no right and no business to overpower someone without their consent and their will, except when they're mutually agreeing in a form of marriage, for example.
Now, you know where I'm going to go with this. It seems that, you just tell me what you think. So obviously there's there's been a number, I think Sweden is one place where they're saying the Islamic community is raping a lot of the local girls and things like that. Is responsible for a lot of the rapes that are occurring in Sweden.
Okay. So, since Islam doesn't encourage them,
it would seem.
Are they following Islam?
Well, I don't know.
First question you'd be asking.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
first question you'd be asking. If Islam, it says, if you were to rape someone, you should be stoned to death. Obviously, these people are not even listening to that.
Yeah.
Yep. So it is not problem of Islam. It's problem of their Islamic understanding and application of Islam.
Well, I mean, if
they were doing it,
I bring it up.
Assuming this is
I bring it up because you were talking about, Islam says that rapists tend to come out of their own culture, and that's reinforced by what they're taught in their culture. And I'm like, well,
but where are they learning?
These guys are in an Islamic culture, and then they're going out and raping. That doesn't seem to be.
When you say Sweden, is open pornography available everywhere in Sweden? Maybe there is. Maybe it is. Maybe they're conditioned by this openness of sexual immorality in our understanding.
Yeah,
and that is
somehow conditioned. The Swedes don't seem to have that problem, and they have the same access to the porn. It seems that it's. I don't have figures on this.
I don't know these figures anyway. But
yeah, exactly.
Talking from
assumptions, the way the media is reporting it, and I will say that there must be some credibility
I would say,
the numbers.
We need to look at
the Swedes are not doing it, and the Muslims are given the same access to the same pornography.
But obviously, clearly, it's not a Muslim problem, or it's not an Islamic problem. It's a problem of certain individuals who are not applying Islam to them. And the question should be asked is, why aren't they applying Islam to them? What is conditioning them not to apply Islam to them when they are Muslims?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, but you're kind of just. And then
I'm not brushing it aside. I'm simply saying Islam is not the problem. Muslim who are not applying the application of Islam on them.
You're telling me if you don't apply moral principles to your life, then you don't act morally. I mean, we can all say that. It doesn't seem that Islam is.
But that cannot be a counterexample, though. I mean, when you use this as a counterexample.
No, I was just saying that. I don't know. You kind of made it seem like Islam is giving something special that some special teachings the rest of us can't give, and that's why
Islam gives teaching which is far-reaching for everyone to even see and compare, accept, or do whatever your society wants to do. This is your society, but Islamic society has a particular framework, and based on that framework, the society should flourish. And at that point, it did. The point the Islamic society came into decline is an interesting point to study. Why the Islamic society declined at one point, when it was the peak of civilization. We well know that at one point, Islamic society were peak of civilization, where the East and the West, they were all going to that society to learn, to develop, to progress. They were declining for various factors. One of the important factors is their linking with Islam was getting broader and broader, meaning what? They were moving away from Islam and the application of Islam. So the desires overcame many of them. The rulers became corrupt, they corrupted the people. The people became corrupt, they corrupted the ruler. So you had a vicious circle of this corruption and non-application of Islam, and eventually it came to a point where it will crumble, and it did crumble. It's a very crude way of portraying the decline of the Islamic society, but this was one of the major points in the decline, where they were removing away from the Islamic teaching, Islamic ethos, Islamic application of its values, and that's why it declined. When it was applied, prosperity, whether you were Muslim or non-Muslim in an Islamic state, everyone was prospering. The Jewish people were prospering, the Christian people were prospering. They were in higher status in the administration and so on. That happened because the holistic application was there. Today, we don't see this kind of thing happening because Islam is not applied holistically. That's the problem. Holistic application. For example, if you give your child all the money, says don't steal, and then he goes to a gang culture and says stealing gives you power and dominance. Like if I were to rob someone by force and so on, it makes me a very what's it called?
Call it juice in it.
I don't even know. Yeah. So it's not because of his stealing of property. It's because of something else.
Stealing for power.
For power. So that's what. So we need to impart this teaching and this understanding to our youngsters as they grow up. Because we're not doing this, enough, sufficient enough, and that's why people are growing up with minds which are, as you will say, messed up. Anyway, it's been nice talking to you.
Thanks.
We'll talk again. What's your name?
Ken.
Ken,
Yeah.
it's a pleasure speaking to you, and we can talk again.
Yeah.
And look into Islam, and especially on this issue about Islamic crime and punishment, and the conditions that are needed. And then you can see, because your concept of God, you're agnostic to it, but if there was a God, you would expect the God to be just and fair. And this is where you can link that. Okay?
All right.
Take care again.
See you.
See you later.